Hello. Um, Welcome to my presentation. A little bit about me. My name is Taylor Millington. I was raised in Indiana, like central, kind of rural Indiana, and then I moved with my parents and my siblings to Texas when I was 15. We lived in like a suburb of Dallas, Texas. Um, my mom's side of the family is Catholic. They're all still Catholic, and they have been for as long as I am aware. And my dad's side, similarly, has always been Mennonite. Um, my dad's family, like my grandparents, left the conservative Mennonite church, and then kind of grew up loosely Mennonite and just kind of Anabaptist Christian. Um, but yes, like ancestrally on that side, I'm Mennonite, and on my mom's side, I'm Catholic, Irish Catholic. Um, my mom was a huge, she was not a fan of the Catholic Church. And so when she got married, became an adult, she knew she didn't want to continue being a member of the Catholic Church. And my dad was just kind of loosely Christian, like his family was. Still had some kind of ties to Anabaptist Mennonite faith, but was more just loosely Christian. And so when my parents got married, my mom just kind of like was adopted into that, and we kind of grew up with more of that like Anabaptist influence than Catholic. I don't think there was really any part of my childhood that was Catholic beyond just knowing that my grandparents and aunts and uncles were Catholic. Um, yeah, the town that we lived in Indiana didn't have any like liberal Mennonite churches. And so the next best thing that my parents could find was an American Baptist church. Um, if you guys aren't familiar with American Baptist, it's quite different um, in like the culture. It's different than Southern Baptist, which is the more like popular one. Um, American Baptist is a little bit more mainline Protestant, um, and less like evangelical. Um, they share a lot of the same like theological beliefs, but the priority of the church is more like community focused. Um, we didn't do a whole lot of like evangelizing mission trips in the American Baptist Church. Most of our mission trips were just volunteering, basically. Um, like cleaning up after tornadoes and stuff like that. Versus the Southern Baptist Church missions are more like street evangelism and stuff like that. Yeah, so like I said, my mom's family is Irish Catholic. Um, and then my dad's family is Mennonite. Some more conservative, and then some just more liberal, like loosely Mennonite. Um, I have more of a connection, like religion aside and theology aside, I have more of a connection with the Mennonite ancestry. Um, Despite like not being raised in that like kind of religious community, I was raised with a lot of knowledge of like my ancestors and their cultural traditions and the Mennonite, like the history of Mennonites, and yeah, just kind of like a basic understanding of Mennonite beliefs and culture and stuff like that. So I feel a lot more connected to that than I do to the Catholic side of my family. So my non-religious, I guess, personal history. Everywhere I lived was pretty white, middle class, and like Christian in Indiana and in Texas. Um, in my early childhood, obviously, I was in the Midwest, and so that's kind of what gave me my foundational, like, cultural experience. And then I had kind of like a contrast to that when I lived in I lived in Texas for about 10 years. Um, so those are kind of the two cultures that I grew up in for the most part. Um, yeah, there are a lot of similarities, I think, between the two cultures, but um, it was a bit of culture shock moving from the Midwest to Texas, despite like both of them being kind of, white, Christian, like evangelical, mostly Christian. There were some like cultural differences that were really interesting. Um, Specifically just between American Baptist and Southern Baptist, like I was talking about. Um, I was born and raised like a girl, a woman. Today I identify as non-binary. I just don't really feel super connected to any gender beyond just like my experience of being treated like a woman, sexism, stuff like that. Um, I do have that kind of experience and sort of an identity, but personally, I don't feel a connection with that gender. My experience growing up as a queer person in both Baptist churches, so American Baptist and Southern Baptist, was not positive. Both of those churches are not very inclusive of LGBTQ identity. Um, I would say Southern Baptist is a little bit more against it, like explicitly against it. Um, and because of that, I faced so much like opposition that I very quickly wanted nothing to do with those like specific denominations. So I no longer personally associate with the American Baptist or Southern Baptist like church. Um, and I haven't since I was maybe 15 or 16. Um, Today I have my own beliefs about God. I've always been a very religious person. Um, I do, funnily enough, believe in a lot of the same things that liberal Mennonites believe in. Liberal Mennonites are actually very inclusive, surprisingly. Mennonite Church USA, and then Quakers, which is loosely Christian faith group. But I don't technically formally belong to any of these churches. I was never baptized even when I was a kid. Yeah, my personal beliefs just align with those churches. So the first passage that I wanted to talk about in my presentation has to do with atonement theories. Mark 10:45 says, "For the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many." And in the Jewish Annotated New Testament, there's an in-text essay titled "Jesus Dying as a Ransom," page 90. And that passage just kind of talks in general about like atonement theories and the fact that there's multiple different atonement theories and that there's no way for us to like for all scholars to come to one agreement about like exactly what Jesus's death meant for us as Christians. And so in the in-text essay, he does, or the author does, describe these like potential atonement theories of like paying off a debt to either God or Satan, averting divine retribution, or like a ritual sacrifice similar to other ritual sacrifices performed at the time by Jews mostly, although maybe also by other religious groups. And what really interested me the most about this was just the fact that the author of this in-text essay was acknowledging the fact that there are a lot of different atonement theories, and that it's a little bit more up to like scholarly interpretation. And I just think it's very kind of enlightening to the richness and the variety of Christian thought traditions. There have been so many different interpretations of certain things, like the atonement, within Christian tradition, and I think that that's very interesting. Like I was kind of saying, I'm a big fan of learning multiple theories for different theological concepts. I like to kind of compare and contrast. I just think it's very interesting, even if I'm not personally, I don't personally have as much of a religious stake in the answer. I just think it's really cool to like study. And yeah, I agree with the author of the essay that there is a lot of ambiguity in this passage specifically in Mark, that no agreement can be made about the meaning of Jesus' death and what ransom meant, like what the author really meant by ransom. Okay, the second passage was talking about kind of why Christians are no longer Jews. And here you can see the passage from Colossians. Therefore, do not let anyone condemn you in matters of food and drink, or of observing festivals, new moons, or Sabbaths. These are only a shadow of what is to come, but the substance belongs to Christ. If with Christ, I skipped a little bit right there. If with Christ you died to the elemental spirits of the universe, why do you live as if you still belong to the world? Why do you submit to these regulations? Do not handle, do not taste, do not touch. All these regulations refer to things that perish with use. They are simply human commands and teachings. These have indeed an appearance of wisdom in promoting self-imposed piety, humility, and severe treatment of the body, but they are of no value in checking self-indulgence. So that's the passage. And then the in-text essay that I chose to go along with that is called Colossians and Torah Observance on page 412. I thought that this essay was interesting because like a lot of what Paul and some other authors, like, and even Jesus's teachings in the Gospels kind of hinted more at like, yes, we're Christians, we're like kind of this new branch, but we are also like still Jews, and you should still like observe Jewish laws. And so this passage is kind of contradictory to that. The author is encouraging Christians to like separate themselves from Jews with the like avoiding obeying the Torah commandments. And there was one quote in the essay that I thought really made this clear. The author says, "Since Jesus' death, there is no Torah, no commandments, only a new existence in a new world." Yeah, this essay just kind of helped me see a point of view from like that maybe Christians might have as to why like Torah observance isn't for them. It's only for Jewish people who aren't Christians. Because that's always been kind of a question that I've had even before this class. Like why don't Christians observe some of these like Jewish holidays like Passover? It was always just a question that I had. Keeping kosher, things like that. This essay kind of claims or like highlights that the separation from Torah was like a necessary separation to establish Christian community as like a new existence in a new world. This interpretation, it's interesting and it makes sense to me, like if I was reading it from a Christian perspective of why, as a Christian, I shouldn't observe Torah. I understand the significance of standing out as a religious group, or even just any ideological group. I understand the value of standing out from other groups. I think this passage and this essay alone doesn't fully convince me that that's like what Christians should do instead of, observing the Torah, but it is like a first step into understanding the motivations behind some Christians for not observing the Torah. Okay, that's my presentation. I hope you enjoyed watching it and listening to me talk. Thank you very much.